I don't know about you all, but I am incredibly tired of the stereotypical polytheistic Greek-style Pantheon setup that you find in almost every campaign or setting these days.
Shut up. Shut your ugly, old-time, ancient ass up. If you say one more word to me, I'll have that lady take one of her titties and beat the shit out of you.
Now, clearly it works. There's a reason people default to this style of religion for their games so often. The Greek style especially works because it is effectively a shortcut to a religious system based on its simplicity. Every god has a clear domain, you've got basic transactional setup with mortals, and the gods feel human enough to relate to. The problem that I have is that the majority of the time, this never really asks much of the players or characters in the setting. I know that's a Dungeon Master issue, but I think it is exacerbated by the transactional nature of this style of religion. You need healing? Pray to the god of health. Need weapons? Pray to the god of war or the god of blacksmithing. It's just so transactional, like religion reduced to a vending machine. I was so tired of this that in my most recent setting, I just axed the idea of gods altogether. I had beings similar to demigods of varying levels, but no immortal being-style rulers from above. This ultimately was a mistake, I feel, but it was a learning one. What it came down to, for me, is that if I want faith or religions in my setting, then I think faith needs to be complex and paradoxical. My main issue with the polytheistic Greek approach is that faith generally lacked any sense of mystery, awe, or personal conflict. It never really seemed like, as a player, my character was ever challenged by their beliefs. To me, if there's no challenge, then there's no weight to the faith. No sacrifice, struggle, or reward beyond some mechanical bonus, ultimately making it all feel like I was just picking a small proficiency of sorts. So as I said, to move beyond the typical polytheistic setup, I feel that faith should in many ways be complex and contradictory. I don't think gods need simple domains or personalities. Rather, they should be vast and unknowable, embodying multiple, often conflicting aspects that defy easy categorization. Faith itself should be personal. Let characters wrestle with the nature of their beliefs, their doubts, and the pressure to conform to doctrine even when it contradicts their moral compass. You should introduce sects within the same religion that interpret their god's will in radically different ways. Characters should also meet followers of their god who hold entirely opposite beliefs. That way, faith then kind of becomes a journey, an exploration of identity and a struggle for answers that might never come. It would be nice to see people move away from gods who act like human beings with their very own egos, pet peeves, and favorite weapons. Instead, I think you should look to design deities who are a bit more like forces of nature or cosmic entities with no regard to human sensibilities. Instead of direct conversation like most people portray worship, have them speak through cryptic omens or dreamlike visions. While it can be cool at times to see the followers of the god of war clash, with the followers of the god of the hunt or whatever, I have never really been invested in these outcomes. I'm not sure what it was, but there was this heavy disconnect, and it seemed like, at least in my experience, it almost always boiled down to petty disputes. I imagine faith not only as a stabilizing force that secures societies, but also as a major source of conflict. Religions should clash, but not just because of territorial squabbles. When faith is central to a society, people will do things for it that seem insane to anybody else, things that may even tear that society apart. Sacred texts should be left intentionally vague, open to dangerous interpretations that lead to schisms and cults who each think they found the truth. While I am a major advocate for good versus evil, I don't think that has to be the only source of conflict within a setting. Faith itself should fuel just as much conflict, deeply held convictions coming into inevitable explosive conflict. You end up with things such as holy wars that aren't just fought for resources or land, but for the right to define reality. To me, this makes the world feel much more alive, where every act of faith has stakes far beyond a character's personal power or piety. Another critical layer in world building, specifically around faith and religions that I find lacking, is doubt. In settings where the gods are as flawed and human as Greek deities, doubt is rare or completely illogical because the gods are literally constantly present, tangible, and responsive. But in a setting where the god or gods are undefinable and their motivations obscure, doubt becomes kind of a core element of faith. That way, it's more than just a ritual, but a complex, ongoing internal struggle for the character. Right now, the way I see it and have experienced it, faith in tabletop games just seems cheap. Most players treat divine interaction like ordering off a menu. I pray, therefore I receive. I guess it should come as no surprise, There's a lot of people in the real world that treat it this way.
Yo! Hold up! Time out! Time out! You need to cool that shit out.
That's a bit deeper than I want to go with this video, but I really feel like faith in a world with true divine presence shouldn't be transactional. It should be demanding. Sacred sites and the ability to visit them should demand devotion and ritual. Religion should not be a passive trait. And this goes for all levels. I'm not just talking about benevolent, good divine forces. This should stand for all types of faith across the setting. I don't know, maybe this is something that doesn't resonate with people, and people just want the religious part of tabletop games to kind of just be a fun character element. To me though, when you make religion and faith matter, then everything else that flows from it matters. Sacred spaces and the desecration or consecration of these locations is hugely impactful and matters immensely to the characters of the setting. It makes for difficult conflicts, at least between those that aren't all that different. All of this is more buy-in for the characters and something to ingratiate them into the setting in a meaningful way. To me, the most compelling part about introducing religions and faith like this is just how much it can influence and shape a character. It's one thing to believe, but it's another thing entirely to act on that belief. These types of religions aren't passive. They want action and devotion that the gods and everyone else can see. You don't get away with just saying a few words or lighting a candle. You have to prove yourself in ways that alters your life, taking vows, making offerings, or committing to rituals that put you on a path that you cannot backtrack from. A person's faith in religion becomes who they are in a lot of ways, defining their decisions, loyalties, and moral identity, and that can't be easily shaken or set aside. A devout priest isn't just someone who believes, they are a different kind of person entirely. Their faith marks them, changes how others see them, and defines how they see themselves. It could just be that my experiences with the polytheistic setup has been bad, but I've seen a lot of people complain about this part of tabletop games as well. That faith or belief in any of these gods never really shapes or molds characters over time the way real faith does. Again, I don't mean to be sending shots, but in a way it does make sense. A lot of people in real life approach faith this way. It doesn't change them or influence how they act, it just is. But even in that case, there are tons of people who are deeply affected by their faith, and I feel like you never really see that represented in most games. To kind of wrap things up, the most frustrating thing about the Greek-style setup is I think a lot of people use the gods as a form of deus ex machina. The gods appear in person, sometimes to solve great problems or bail the characters out. What is more compelling to me is divine silence. The gods don't answer prayers, at least not in an overtly obvious way, and they damn sure don't appear in person to solve any problems at all. If anything, they leave their most devoted followers in the dark. Divine silence isn't indifference, it's a test, and sometimes the purest form of communication you can get from a being that sees and knows all. Despite all of this, faith is a choice to believe in the power of something bigger, something that stands above the pain and suffering of the mortal plane. It means that characters stand at odds with a world that doesn't necessarily make sense and choose to see purpose where others see random chance. It isn't naive, it's an act of courage and a force that keeps people from surrendering to despair. So, let me know what you guys think. Is this too complex? Is religion and faith at its best in tabletop games when used transactionally for simple character fun? Either way, thank you for watching. I am Trill, and I hope you enjoyed.